Screen.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think last week I kind of talked about some of our thoughts around essentially updating our EPP such that it doesn't require the Dynamo runtime and the operator. So yeah, essentially the motivation is that a user that has a deployment with VLM serve and a Kubernetes gateway would be able to take this EPP component that encapsulates all of Dynamo's routing logic and deploy it along with like the inference extension resources, your inference pool, your HTTP route, and get like the benefits of Dynamo KV aware routing without having to kind of adopt our operator and runtime. So that's kind of the high level idea. And then I think so. There's another dep here that I linked on the standalone selection service, which essentially encapsulates all of our routing logic and provides an API, a Rust API for the EPP to interface with. And so kind of the separation of concerns there is that the EPP handles the XProc and communication with the gateway, tokenization, worker discovery, the request lifecycle, and then the selection service would essentially handle like consuming KV events from workers, indexing that, selecting a worker, and kind of doing the bookkeeping of the request for load tracking. So yeah, can kind of high level go over some of the pieces. The worker discovery, the EPP would watch the inference pool, discover different workers, and register that with the selection service. This section goes over the different APIs that the selection service exposes and how that is used. We have like the different environment variables that the EPP will need, or there's a section on like what is required versus not. This kind of goes over the request life cycle for an aggregated request. So request goes in the gateway, XProc has to request to EPP based off the inference pool. The EPP itself tokenizes and then uses the selection service to select a worker. And that worker is returned as like a pod IP and pod IP import to the gateway. The gateway forwards that request. One thing I kind of call it here is the challenges with tokenization. So in our like full Dynamo EPP, the Dynamo EPP does the tokenization and then can inject the token IDs into the request. And then because we're forwarding that request to like a Dynamo front end sidecar, we can like pull out the tokens and directly pass it to the engine. But now because users bringing in their own like VLM, SGLang, or TLM deployment, we can only use like the open AI HTTP server that they're exposing along with any like headers that they have. So I kind of outline different options, but I think essentially the initial approach will be this sidecar approach where like VLM, for example, has a render API where you can run VLM, essentially pass the same command, but you only get the essentially like pre-processing that is running, and it can just run on a CPU. And so the EPP for tokenization would call out to the like essentially VLM render sidecar for the tokenization, and that is needed so that we can essentially see what worker has the most overlap. Yeah, and then it kind of covers like parity with the different backends. And then for disaggregated serving, there's kind of two pieces. One, how the EPP interfaces with the selection service, because the API is more, the API itself doesn't have like disag specific semantics. But essentially the idea is that we'd have like a selection service instantiation per prefill and decode. And this kind of walks through why. And then for decode, we need essentially some orchestrator to send a prefill and decode request, because the gateway is just forwarding one request, but we need something to orchestrate kind of sub requests for prefill and decode. And for VLM, the prefill gets a request first, we get a response, and then we send a request to decode. But SGLang requires kind of a concurrent request. And then depending on like the transfer engine for VLM might require different arguments. So we propose using a sidecar that can intercept the original chat completion request and perform this orchestration. And this is the same as how LMD approaches things. So this kind of walks through that. And then this section kind of covers having multiple EPP replicas. So it'd be kind of an active approach where the EPPs would discover each other and can do an initial dump on like the KV indexer state. Because like when a new replica comes up, it has no knowledge of what cache lives on the workers. So on startup, it would request that state. But the actual like lifecycle requests would not be shared. That would be something that is only like once multiple replicas are running, would they kind of share each request coming in over ZMQ. Yeah, and then this section just kind of covers this approach versus like what you get with the full Dynamo runtime router. I think kind of the immediate things are request migration, topology aware routing, session affinity, and then kind of additional API coverage outside of like text and chat. And these are things that are all solvable with this approach. It's just for this kind of initial V1 implementation. So yeah, and then this kind of goes over the different milestones. So yeah, I'll pause there. I don't want to go too much like further into things, but yeah, if there's any questions that you guys have, definitely let me know.
Just one question from Nile. Do we have a timeline, I think? Yeah.
Sorry, I'm like new to Meet or sharing.
Do we have a timeline for comments, questions before closing the deck?
Yeah, I guess appropriate timeline for comments and questions would be probably over this next week. Yeah, I think there's kind of like the shorter term approach or kind of the shorter term milestones that I've outlined, and then kind of longer term work, like getting kind of full parity.
I'm not sure who's speaking. It's very hard to understand. Maybe what in chat?
I mean, so maybe, I guess we're saying we'll give a week. So maybe next week this time for people to try to get their comments in. Is that fair? And are there specific areas you want more specific looks, like areas where, yeah, you want people to focus in on, or?
Yeah, sorry about that. I had some like background noise. Yeah, I guess in terms of like areas to focus, I think one is like the tokenization piece. There's like different potential approaches there, and I kind of outline like the like pros and cons of each approach. So I think that would be an area to focus in on. And then also, I guess like the disaggregation piece and like using a sidecar would also, if there are other approaches that I'm like overlooking, but I've tried exhaustively to see if there was alternative approaches. So yeah, sorry, was that all parts of your question?
Yeah, for me. Yeah.
I have a question for the bigger context of that. This is basically an alternative mode to run EPP and move more responsibility into the EPP and support vanilla VLMs or other engines, right? Is this like parallel forever, or will we converge? Is there a migration path for that? Like when I start in this mode, that I can switch over? Should I switch over?
Yes, that's a very good question. I think we intend for this to be an initial on-ramp for the time being. So the idea is like you can get the benefits of KBO routing minus kind of the features that I outlined that are lacking. And then you would migrate to like the full Dynamo EPP, like with the operator in runtime. TBD on the longer term, like is like having this runtimeless EPP essentially replace the current one. I think for the immediate term, we will support both.
And is there a migration? Like there are thoughts about migration. When I start with that and now I install the operator, does this mean I basically have to start a DGD in parallel with the native modes? Or is there anything possible where we can move over in a different way? Probably not, right?
I guess the migration would be like you have your VLM server deployment, your gateway, and then you deploy this Dynamo EPP. And then to migrate to like the full Dynamo runtime EPP would essentially require like installing the whole platform operator, converting your VLM server deployment into a DGD. So I mean, it essentially would be kind of a full by hand migration. I'm not really sure there's like a way to do that cleanly.
So the objects are owned by different parties, but the deployment is different. So you basically have to re-adopt or something like that. It sounds complicated. Probably not worth it.
The goal is to have this as a trial deployment for Dynamo for users who have pure VLM. Try it out, see how it goes. And if they're okay with limited feature set, they can keep it. If they want the full power of Dynamo, that offers a lot more for reliability, fault tolerance, then they would have to reinstall everything and switch to Dynamo at this time. And I think this gap will persist forever, but this gap will shrink.
Sounds good. Other questions? So Nidhi is asking, is anybody here who can help reviewing that? Like, who can give external feedback? Who would be a key stakeholder reviewer? If anybody wants to help, this would be the time. Or maybe speak to Nidhi or speak to Anna and Thomas.
Yeah, I just wanted to see, particularly outside of our core Dynamo team here, like the larger community, who are the main folks who we expect to be able to review for this week, and do they have bandwidth?
All right. So is there any bigger other topic? So I have a couple just announcement basically. So those are pretty quick, but is there any bigger topic you want to talk about? Maybe I start with the first one. So we have merged the code owner change. So you might have noticed that the groups which have to approve your pull request are different. So they should be smaller. And just ask for feedback if it's better or worse. Please speak up. One thing you can do, I think, now when you have a pull request, look into the required approvals, click on the groups, and I checked a few, and there are just a handful or sometimes a bit more people in there, so much easier to find people and ping them. But how's the gut feeling of the group? So is it positive? No opinion? Thomas, any experience?
Sorry, I wasn't fully
Just
paying
putting you on the
attention.
spot. Just feedback about code owners. The change that we don't have those Python and Rust groups anymore, but smaller groups for groups.
I think it. I guess my initial feedback is that I think it's better to have things more scoped. I mean, the fact that Dynamo is like such a monolith repo. I feel like the previous code owners was like pretty like widespread. And so I hope this is like more closely aligned to the folks like actually working on certain pieces. But I think we rolled this out like early this week, so I haven't had enough time to form a full opinion. I think it's more like internally, it's easier for us to know who to reach out to for code reviews, but I think it's more so for the community itself. Is this like helpful for them?
Yeah, from an external perspective, it would be very useful if the code owners were also mapping to the new Slack handles, so we can know who to reach out for each part of Dynamo, because it's a really huge code base, and I know there are many different responsible people.
Yeah, I will talk about Slack in a minute, and I asked exactly that question today, that we get those groups, please. It's our Slack now, so we can create any groups, so there's no technical reason anymore not to have them.
Actually, it would be awesome to have like automation that would also create Slack messages and tag people for reviews in the new Slack channel. That would be cool.
Yeah, we can also have bots now, right? This is another benefit from our own Slack, so we could do that.
Yeah, there's the community bot already. So yeah, maybe every time there's like a request for review, you can probably go look at who are the people and then tag them automatically as well. Yeah,
this would be awesome. Yes,
everything seems feasible. I mean, the only part that I have is like I think the automation stuff. I still feel like it's one of those things where I think it's when you're doing it manually, you have only yourself to blame, and so there's a little bit of frustration, but you understand the frustration. Sometimes when the automation goes wrong, I think you tend to get a little bit more frustrated because now it's like, why is this thing going wrong, kind of thing. So I think we still have some automation stuff to figure out. Like there was a couple of requests where I think the runtime was flagged as a required reviewer, but it wasn't clear to me that there was any run. Like I looked at the thing, I couldn't see any runtime changes at all. So
what I noticed when you have a change by accident in your PR, then those approvals are required and they don't go away. Like I had the process group because I had an agent MD at the root or something like that, so they were flagged.
Got it. Yeah. So maybe with each commit, it should reevaluate or something.
Yeah. Maybe it's a GitHub thing. I don't know. All right. So about Slack, maybe I continue with the last topic. Anish announced it already last week. So there is a new Slack. It's real, and we are moving over like internal people and ask for reviews. So everything is set up at the moment. time frame is still end of month, roughly. So in 2 weeks, maybe it's open for everybody. And the goal is to move all public communication there. So I talked to a couple of people about reviews, and that they have contributions, and then there are the same contributions from internal people. The hope is that this will not happen because everything is basically there. So if there's a request for review, it will happen there in the reviews channel. So there's a Dynamo minus reviews channel. And whether it's external, internal, it's just a matter of the name of the person, basically. But everybody should put their RFRs, their review requests there. So this will help, I think, everybody involved, especially the external people. No, this is not the CNCF Slack. This is a new Slack. And yeah, as I said, it's not open yet. So there will be an announcement probably in 2 weeks, a link where you can register and sign up. And then all communication is over there. It's our Slack, so we can run bots, we can create groups, everything. And we have a large set of channels, not just one as at the moment, but there will be a dev channel, there will be different special interest groups, so you can talk about router in one channel and find the right people there. So lots of improvements coming there. All right, so Slack is coming. Last topic releases 1.3. So technically today, I think, is the end of the cycle. So there should be a release. I'm not sure we make that. There was an internal message like 12 bugs are still being worked on. So maybe it will take some time, but I think we're near. So there's an RC12. So if you look on the release channel, release branch, it's not tagged yet, but there's a release candidate and we're working on that. Just heads up, 1.4 is already, the code freeze is in 2 weeks. So if you want to get something bigger in, it's already in 2 weeks. So there's not so much time actually. Okay. Do we have more topics? Anything you want to talk about? Last chance. Otherwise, we are nearly at the top of the hour. Everybody gets some minutes back.
Yeah, did we already cover the Dynamo upcoming events? I don't know if it's here, and I don't know if I know the exact schedule, but I know there's a.
You mean the end of months? What is it?
Yes.
What's the name? Maybe if we can talk about it. I think Anish mentioned it maybe, but you know more about that. After hours, I see.
Yes.
Right? This is the one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't know if people have already signed up or not, but yeah, there's the Dynamo After Hours on the 30th.
Do we have a link to sign up?
How
does this work?
There is something.
So lots of good stuff coming end of July, it seems.
Yeah, I'm just looking now for the link. But we can post it in the notes or something as well. I'll find it in time.
Yeah, maybe it's also worth to post it in the channel, in the old CNCF one. So people know where to click.
There. Yeah. Oh,
I haven't seen it, so maybe it's not there yet.
I found a Luma link. Hopefully that's the right thing. Where is the channel? I'll put the channel here. So.
There we go. Okay, if there are no other topics, near the top of the hour. Thanks everybody, and yeah, see you next week, guys.
Thanks.
See you.
Bye.